I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got love, peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got power, poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA.
Devilish dates. Outskirts of Rome. It was a sunny day in that region of the world, the normal people going about their day normally, while those that work behind the scenes of perceived normality worked to maintain their peace and control. Again, the church members in the know was debating the merits and penalties of their new so-called alliance, and again the division of those loyal to heaven argued with the blind hateful of their core opposites in the devil's and heretic Japan. The grudges of the persecution by the Tokugawa shoguns and the failure of the Shimabara rebellion still burned in their hearts. It didn't matter how much time had passed, or that change was coming by the decree of heaven. Day by day, more and more were coming closer and closer to becoming stray exorcists, especially with who were the majority in being selected to become brave saints. However, the church's internal strife wasn't Ichigo's concern. Despite his friendship and alliance with the angels of heaven, the humans of the church were more their own entity that did not leave a good impression on the Shinigami. He'd help if Michael asked in any way he could, but for now his main concerns were on the OSF and their supposed planned assault during the next raiding game. Enough bugged members of the treasonous rebels were talking and gave them such a timeline, giving the ruling Satans plenty of time to make their own plans and countermeasures. This and other more recent news were the reason behind his most recent visit to the territory of the angels. I must admit, that news is a tad surprising to say the least, Michael said, he and Gabriel having come to meet Ichigo, hidden among the clouds and looking down on a familiar orphanage. Still, I happily congratulate you. Any new life is to be celebrated. Though, I'm not sure it was wise to allow such a procedure to be done. A pensive look still on his face. Seraphil's a powerful devil, Ichigo responded. Keeping her away from any conflict for any reason is a detriment that I'd rather avoid. He told them about the BRTH of his daughter, but not the exact circumstances that led to it. Instead, that she was removed and had her growth accelerated outside of Seraphil's body in an incubation tube. Everything worked out and our daughter is perfectly healthy. Then I'll be happy for you, the angel said with a brief smile before concern took over his features again. And, while I fully trust you and your people's capabilities, are you certain you don't want any assistance in the coming battle? I've made Dulio my joker, and he's eager to see you and Orihime again. I appreciate it, but the whole of the biblical factions should focus on their own recovery. The commander answered. Heaven is still the worst off in terms of numbers despite the swords and crystals I've supplied you with. We still don't know where Jean disappeared to, Gabriel admitted with her own tone of concern, and even Mordred and Lancelot went missing. Not just them, the Grecian heroes have gone off the grid as well if Artemis tells me the truth, Ichigo added. Needless to say, something is going on with those that carry the legacy of heroes. Most distressing, Michael said, putting a hand to his chin. Is this the Chaos Brigade or something else at play? We should focus on solidifying our positions and alliances while strengthening our forces. Ichigo turned to Gabriel. Seraphil and I had the benefit of knowing each other and dating for years, but we don't even know each other. I know this is a political arrangement, but how about moving to Karakura and Soul Society so we can get a better understanding of each other and how to further our respective groups? The two angels turned to each other and started weighing the pros and cons. I certainly wouldn't mind moving, Gabriel said, and he's right. I should get a better understanding of my future husband and sister wives. He is Gabriel. But at the same time I can't help but worry for you, Michael admitted. Some in heaven and maybe even the church would react poorly to the idea of you leaving, let alone getting married. He turned to Ichigo. Do you mind if she takes some, maybe all of her brave saints with her? She absolutely can, but they'll still be watched as a precautionary measure, the hybrid told them. Security and whatnot. The two angels looked to each other again before Michael nodded. I'll go pack my things, Gabriel said excitedly before flying off. Once she was out of eyesight, Michael turned to Ichigo. I'll keep her safe. She reminds me of Orihime when we first started dating, the shogun said, not exactly soothing the angel's concerns. The next day, 15 days until the Gremoriasterov game. The days settled into a fine routine for the Devils of Kuo. go to their classes, train till sunset, and enjoy their recovery in the form of hot springs or Kirio's frozen foods, performing their contract services, sleep and repeat. Taking into account that the next raiding game is likely a shame where a hopeful final battle with the old Satan faction would be taking place, an altered approach was taken. It wasn't as severe to break them down and build them up as soldiers, but they learned to be more proactive and underhanded in perceived life or death matches and became roughly 35% stronger than they were before. As such, they were given a day off from their training to spend however they wished. So Riaz and Sona decided to have their date competition, dragging Issei and Saji to Karakura town under Oraheim's suggestion. Once they arrived, they agreed to go their separate ways and explore the city with their respective partner, intending to meet up later as a cafe run by one of the Quincy that their teacher recommended. This was supposed to be a date, and they knew that if they did stick around each other, then they'd end up competing in one way or another. Riaz wouldn't forgive herself if she was lovey-dovey out of a sense of competition, and both girls acknowledged that their dates deserved better. Thus began their adventures in the living world base of the Soul Society. Sona and Saji's date. Sona did her research and drew up an itinerary, but that was stolen by a small black cat that told them to just let go and explore, in a childish high-pitched tone. After getting over the shock of a talking cat, reasoning that it wasn't the weirdest thing they'll encounter, Saji did as it suggested and started pulling Sona along. Their course took them to a bookstore first, browsing the different tomes and catalogs for anything that may interest them. Sona picked up a few workbooks and Saji picked up a teacher's guide and chess strategy books, but he mostly grabbed manga. Next, Saji brought them to an arcade, trying to help Sona unwind a bit more. "I don't know Saji," the Citri heiress said as they entered the building, the loud chatter and noises from various machines and patrons filling the air as screens flashed their colors and games. "I've never had any interest in this kind of stuff. You just need to find the right match for you," Saji said as they passed a few consoles. "You wouldn't be fond of shooters, racers, or beat-em-ups, but I know how fond you are of strategy, so I think this is more your speed." "Puyo," she asked, watching as two players engaged in a match. From what she could understand, the game was about dropping different colored slime creatures down and getting a direct connection between 4 minimum. The game ends when one player's slimes reach the top of the screen. "Seems interesting. Very well, let's play. I'll go easy until you get the hang of things," Saji said, trying to sound confident. 10 rounds later, he still hasn't won a single round. "I'll admit, I can see the value in games like these," Sona said with a smug smile, enjoying adding a new strategy game to her repertoire. "Any others you'd recommend?" she asked her dear pawn, hunched over and shaking with embarrassment at how easily he's been crushed by a newbie gamer. A small petty side of him pointed to a fighting game and thought of how to justify its worth. "Another test of reflexes and strategy, how you can operate the character you choose," he declared, getting a raised eyebrow from his king before she smirked and started walking over. "Let me do a few rounds against the computer. Just until I get used to it," she said as she took her seat and made her selection. 5 minutes later. "Got a break. Come on," she growled as she was in the deciding match between her and Saji, her inexperience showing. "Ah," she cried out as her character fell, marking her 3rd loss while Saji's character had a 5th of their own health bar left. "It's frightening how fast you pick up on these games," the bearer of Ritra said as he tried catching his breath and steadying his heart rate. The stakes were raised as the two made a wager on a best 3 out of 5 match once he noticed how much she started enjoying it. "Well, my lady," he started as he got out of his seat to claim his prize from her. "Shall we head to our next destination?" he asked, offering his hand. She gave it a glance before slyly smiling and taking it. "Very well, you won the right to hold my hand after all," she said, rising to her feet. "Now, let's go to our next destination." The wager was for Saji to either devote his all to their next exams or to have the chance to hold hands with Sona, depending on if he lost or won. Having won, they simply walked, hand in hand, being subtly directed to a Quincy Sun gate and sent into the shadow side. They would later meet with Riaz and Issei at the Quincy's cafe. Riaz and Issei's date. Riaz was in awe of the sight of Shadow Karakura, the free-roaming draconic beings, the mix of Japanese and European aesthetics, The way nature seemed to harmoniously coexist with the city by the way the plant life seemed so naturally entwined with the buildings, and the myriad of races walking about normally. All the different yakai, the humans she assumed were spiritually aware. It was like her first time in Kyoto once more. They were wandering about for a while before meeting a blue-skinned Oni and asked for points of interest. Ria's immediately asking in a very excited tone for traditional. He brought them to a Bunraku show, telling the tale of the Unifiers of Japan. Both devils gave rapt attention to the puppet show unfolding of the bloody events that brought an end to the Warring States era, and were surprised by the additional story of how Ichigo came to his position in unifying the spiritual entities of Japan. That was interesting, Ria said as they walked away from the tented pavilion. The way those puppets moved and operated, how much work and coordination must have gone into each detail for all those people to portray that story. Yeah, definitely not what I thought of when I heard it was a puppet show, Issei said as they walked on through the streets of the hidden city. So, anything you want to try now, Prez? He asked as they continued their stride side by side, looking around the city for anything that could catch their eye in the historic district. Eventually, they came across a traditional pavilion with the name Jigoku no Hana carved in above the doorway. Issei was watching the various girls dressed in fancy kimono with snow-white makeup and BLD red lips dancing, talking, or serving tea through the windows, but what caught Ria's eye was a flyer offering dance lessons. "Let's go here," she said, pulling Issei along before he could say anything. They entered the building and the calming scent of incense immediately washed over them while the strumming of a stringed instrument created a soothing melody. The pair were greeted to another woman sitting at the front desk, who greeted them with a smile. "Welcome to the Hell's Blossom Geisha House," she said before giving a polite bow. "Is this your first time here? Is there anything specific you'd like to request of our services?" Geisha was an old and respectable profession of Japanese maidens. While they sold their time and services to help people relax and entertain them, they were not WHR as some would suspect. They were artists of dance, music, and conversation. That was how they entertained. "I saw the flyer for dance lessons. Is there an opening?" Ria's immediately requested, causing the girl to nod. "Yes. Lady Adaboshi is out back training some beginners right now." Her eyes glanced over to Issei, who was watching some of the other girls doing their performances. "Is he your lover?" she whispered to the devil, earning a blush from Rias and causing the desk girl to giggle. "Lady Adaboshi could teach you other things as well if you're learning for his sake," she said before walking away from the desk. "Follow me, please." The pair followed the girl to a room where a group of varying girls, some humanoid in appearance with others being different yakai, all doing careful and practiced motions under the direction of a woman in a kimono decorated in fire, skeletons, and hellish demons. "Lady Adaboshi, we have someone interested in joining for a lesson." The teacher turned and both devils gasped as they saw the brief appearance of a skeleton before it was SWCH out for a breathtaking beauty, like a porcelain doll. "Hello?" she greeted with a polite smile and bow. "I'm the proprietor of this house and your teacher. Call me Adaboshi-sensei. No uniforms necessary, just step in and follow direction." Rias nodded and handed her things to Issei before stepping in. He just stood back and watched in interest as Rias did her best to follow the woman's instructions. She had experience in dance, but that was just ballroom waltzes for the sake of fancy noble affairs. This graceful flow of dancing with a partner was not translating easily to the focused and precise motions of the geisha dance. After an hour of this lesson, Adaboshi called it closed. Rias was sweating lightly from the effort and focus exerted in this. "Everyone, I'll see you next time," Adaboshi said as the girls bowed and thanked her. "Gremory, if you want, we have a shower you can use." "Thank you, sensei," she said with a smile. "Issei, here's my card. Please pay for the lesson." "No problem, Prez," the Red Dragon said before rushing off. During the whole exchange, Adaboshi held a knowing smile while Rias walked over to her. "You know, I can offer you some other lessons for pleasing your boyfriend," she said in a suggestive tone, making Rias blush while looking at her in shock. "Don't worry, you're not my type, kid," the older woman said as her appearance flashed again. "But I know longing when I see it. Good sec is important to your relationship, and I've got plenty I could teach you. I was quite the CRTSN in my old life." Rias's face turned crimson before looking at the clock. "What can I learn in 10 minutes?" she finally asked, with Otoboshi giving a knowing smirk. Once that ended, the devils left with Issei looking concerned at a nervous and embarrassed Rias, who was carrying some blank black notebooks. The coming twilight hours of their date were fast approaching, so they began looking for the cafe that the Quincy owned. The final part of the date. The devils were aware that they were basically being led around the city, but that was something they were starting to expect when it came to the Soul Society's territory and agents. Even now they headed to someplace a high-ranked Gotai official owned as an end to their outings. The cafe itself was a rather quaint little place with a sign spelling GAF, but it was like they had a bite taken out of it by the previous letter. Ignoring the odd name, they entered to find the Sternritter Liltato Lamperd munching on a sandwich. "Take a seat, I'll be with you when I'm done," she said, still focusing on her food while the devils found a table. Once they did and started examining the menus, they began talking about their dates, which turned into a passive-aggressive fight between them. "They're at it again," Saji sighed, looking at the two high-ranking devils as they subtly bragged and mocked each other. Still better than Sona and Gremory-senpai trying to kill each other outside of practice though. "Yeah, I'm willing to move on after seeing what you went through, but I don't think Prez will ever forgive President Citri," Issei stated, taking a drink of water. "Maybe Prez will forgive her in the next 1,000 years. If we live that long," Saji added before turning to Issei. "So, what was that puppet show about?" "The Great Unifiers of Japan," the Red Dragon answered. Prez couldn't take her eyes off of it. Those were some skilled puppeteers. Surprising what they can do with practical effects. "Cool," Saji said with a nod, noting that something seemed off. "Anything else?" Issei gained this thoughtful expression. "We stopped by a geisha house that was offering dance lessons that Prez immediately jumped on," the Red Dragon answered with a smile. "While not as sexy as I would have liked, she was certainly entrancing in those elegant movements. I'm glad Prez had fun today," Issei said, looking at Rias in admiration while she blushed but flashed Sona a smug smile. "Issei, why don't you ever refer to Gremory-senpai by name?" Saji asked, confusing the Gremory pawn but made the king in question pause as a flash of recognition crossed her features and even Sona's eyebrows rose a bit. "Well, because Prez is Prez," Issei said, feeling a little uncomfortable with the attention being directed at him. A sensation that was only growing with the look of disappointment and sadness coming to Rias's face. "But you're the one that said, we can marry our MSTR, and you even sacrificed your own arm for the power to break her engagement with the Phoenix clan, right?" Saji countered, making Issei flinch. "So she's supposed to be more than just Prez to you, right?" "Ooh." Issei's mind went into overtime, trying to make sense of things. He knew Saji was right, but at the same time he couldn't really accept doing it. "I've almost died, so many times, for the chance to ask out Sona and call her by name," Saji continued. "And we both know Gremory-senpai is far less strict with you, especially since you're clearly her favorite. So why not?" Issei froze, thoughts racing as to why, even though he wants nothing more than to make Prez his wife, to lay claim that her melons and virginity belong to him alone. He still has this degree of separation between the two of them. Why? It's too late." He froze as a familiar voice rang out, making both his and Rias's eyes snap wide open as they looked to the door and gasped in shock. "There's no way I will give it back." The person talking was a fallen angel, a slender and curvaceous woman with long black hair and violet eyes wearing what could be generously described as a LTHR bikini that hid very little, and feathery wings as black as midnight. The most concerning thing about this fallen angel is, she's supposed to be dead. "Rainair," Issei and Rias shouted as they shot up, Rias ready to fight while Issei was still in shock. Saji and Sona followed suit, ready to help against this enemy, and Liltato was still eating her sandwich. "How are you alive?" Rias demanded while the fallen laughed. "Phew, it was pretty fun. The time I dated you," she said, Issei's eyes widening as a familiar scene played out in his mind. "Yes, watching it was very cute. It's fun to play around with boys who have no experience with a woman." The Red Dragon dropped to his knees and grasped at his head, Rias looking torn between focusing on the enemy and seeing to her dear pawn. "Not this. Not again," Issei begged, tears coming to his eyes as she was reenacting probably his worst moment. "Please not again." It was an ordinary date, Rainier cackled. Thanks to that, I was very bored. That's enough. Another voice sounded from behind Rainier, the Fallen's eyes going blank as a small red ball came out of her mouth before she collapsed to her knees and revealing a short girl wearing a red tracksuit and had her chin-length blonde hair in a messy ponytail. Guess we can call this one a success, she said as she plucked up the ball and threw the body over her shoulder. Hey Lil Tato, is my order ready? Yep, the Quincy said as she reached under the counter and pulled out a paper bag. Here you go, Hiyori. Thanks, the girl said as she flashed over to grab her order, turning around to notice the very confused looks of the devils. Right, I should explain this, she said before addressing the devils. Sorry about this. Name's Hiyori Saragaki, Squad 12 member in charge of Squad 15's monitoring stations, and we just used you for an experiment. The devils were still stunned, but Sona managed to compose herself enough to talk. What kind of experiment? She finally asked. We wanted to see if we could successfully recreate someone from a person's memories, Hiyori answered. See, our division's commanding officer gets us together for office drinking parties, and we record what happens, just in case we come up with any ideas in our drunken stupors. Then we take the ideas, put them in his bucket hat, and assign a team to work on whatever idea he pulls out. First we see if we can actually do it. Then we think about practical applications. It didn't have to be you guys, and this was all very last-minute pickings, but we had the data from when you had the surveillance bacteria and thought, why not? She said, flashing back to the door. By the way, you might want to get that kid into therapy, she suggested before leaving, the stunned and confused devils trying to process what happened. Ready to order? Lil Tato asked, as if nothing major just happened. Underscore 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 FF was being a pain, so I couldn't properly upload sooner. Anyway, trivia time. Bunraku are puppet shows with life-size dolls and careful coordination while the narrator tells the story. These weren't entertainment for a bunch of kids, this was a serious art form for them. Otoboshi. This is not an awk for this one scene. She's an actual legend of Japanese lore also known as Jigoku Teiyu, or Hell CRTSN. A very high-ranked prostitute that was also deeply spiritual as a Buddhist. Next chapter will be Issei getting his much-needed therapy. I blame God of War Valhalla. Underscore 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 omake. No interruptions. Don't lose sight of them. Akino whispered to Kaneko as the orc followed Rias and Issei into Karakura town. It was their obligation to keep an eye on them and make sure the date goes smoothly, or to butt in at the worst possible moment and kill the mood in the case of Akino. Kiba wanted to keep her from doing anything unnecessary and hoped Asia, Kaneko, and Irina would help with that. Gasper was back with Issei's mother, dress shopping. What is that? Asia asked as Rias and Issei stepped on a circular plate and immediately vanished. Acting out of one part concern and one part urgency to not lose target, Irina bolted on ahead to the plate and likewise vanished. Irina, Kiba hissed as he and the rest of the orc moved after them. They reached the plate and teleported away. Wa tilde, Asia cried out as she and the others were lifted into the air. They didn't know what happened. All they knew is that they were caught by a bunch of slimy green tentacles or vines. Kiba, Asia, and Irina had their arms and legs restrained. Kaneko was in a similar position and about to rip her arms free before a flower appeared before her and spat pollen into her face, making her look like she was stoned out of her mind. Tilda and Akino had some coiling tightly around her BRSD, one digging into her crotch, and a final one stuffing itself in her mouth, barely containing her M. As they tried to get their bearings, a voice started sounding out. You'll be staying here until their date is finished. Squad 12 Result Meeting. Hello everyone. Urahara called out as all of Squad 12 tuned in for the latest experiment results from the last Drunk Ideas party, some in person, some through radio, others through monitors as they were computing some data. We just received word from our dear little Hiyori that Team Mayuri and Nozomi's latest project was a success, he said, his visage on the screens being replaced with Mayuri's current face and a woman with chin-length green hair. Let's listen to their comments on their success. There, I did it. Now stop annoying me with these easy projects. Mayuri's voice said. Quit interrupting me. I need to finish these gigi models of the other races. Nozomi's voice said. And stop making these mandatory. Urahara took center screen again. To which I say, no, these are fun. Looking forward to the next. A loud thud was heard. Good work everyone. Carry on while I talk things over with this pain in the butt. Ichigo's voice said as everyone just went back to work. Godai budget review meeting. Everything looks good so far. One of the members of the budget committee stated. Squad 11 is doing fine with the same budget. Just the same request of new exercise equipment, like Captain Zaraki isn't already the strongest man in Soul Society. Now, for Squad 12. There were collective groans as they pulled up the expense reports, and they had another one of those parties. Damage cost is on the low end for once, but these projects. Didn't the Captain Commander have a word with them? That was Kaioraku, and he ended up drinking with them. This is the first one with Commander Kurosaki, and he'll use anything if it proves useful. And that DMN Urahara can make the most pointless idea invaluable. We need a way to stop them. Any ideas? And risk Urahara or Mayuri's wrath? There was a pause. Let's just do this, they said in defeat. Ichigo's talk with Urahara. I don't mind these parties or the experiments of questionable ethics, in healthy moderation, he said while Urahara was tied up and hanging upside down with more than a few lumps on his face. This once-a-month cycle ends, or I'll make sure your specific pay is cut and Aiken gets put in charge of handling your squad's budget. I'll behave, Kisuke mumbled out through swollen lips. And don't think I believe your targeted Gremory and Hayato as a random, last-minute call. I know both Gremory and Citri peerages are still under observation. Issei was the specific target. Ichigo accused, Urahara remaining silent before his figure popped like a balloon. Issei is clearly damaged. Urahara's voice came from behind Ichigo, looking completely serious. We've suspected that his conflict with that fallen angel left a deep wound on his psyche that still hasn't fully healed, and this experiment confirmed that. Ichigo turned to face his old mentor and saw the captain hold out a clipboard and a tablet recording the date between Issei and Reyes. Despite his stated lust as longing for her, Issei's kept a certain distance between himself and Reyes. Basically any girl at that. So? What the hell? Ichigo yelled out in shock, giving Urahara a pause. Is that a play about my life? Well, a Cliff Notes version, the captain answered. They could have at least done it in Shakespearean style. The hybrid groaned out. Whose idea was this? Your wife's? Probably. There was a pause, Ichigo's expression demanding something more specific. The horny one? Ichigo's expression didn't change. Yasaka, hers or Amaterasu's? Handle the Issei thing, I'm getting to the bottom of this, Ichigo ordered before flashing away. Kisuke waited for a few seconds before giggling to himself. He knew setting up that play would get him out of trouble. For the moment. Therapy. Shadow Karakura, Silburn Fortress meeting room. So, why, Surzech asked, the only thing he could fully process after hearing Reyes explain what happened. Himself, Ichigo, Azazel, Issei and Reyes were brought to the main headquarters of Squad 15, a couple of hours after Hiyori revealed the experiment the young devils were made a part of. Was it really just a random experiment and they were unlucky? No, Urahara calculated the odds and made it seem like it was chance, manipulating the events leading up to it with just enough separation that it seemed like he was uninvolved. Ichigo admitted as a Quincy soldat brought them tea. He prefers being several steps ahead of anyone else, that's why he's one of the scarier captains. Ichigo took a cup and sipped. Let that cool down, he advised while everyone else took their cups. Anyway, after reading through the sacred gear research that Azazel provided and our own observations, it's clear that will and longing are huge factors in one's growth with their gear. The two leaders nodded, knowing this information. However, he concluded that Issei's own growth, while consistent, is dangerously explosive and will likely be detrimental to his long-term health. That news shocked Riaz and Issei while the others held stoic expressions. The prevailing theory is that, in a way, he still hasn't gotten over what happened with Rainier. Because he isn't really being himself, Azazel said, shaking his head. I figured that was the case, but I wanted to try and ease into confirming that. Soul Society doesn't really do delicate, do they? More like we'd rather not waste time with guesswork, Ichigo countered, taking a long drink of his tea. From the readings we have and predicting his growth and tendencies, the hypothesis is that he'd start burning through his life force till he had a normal human lifespan again before the new year. A statement that caused the Red Dragon and Crimson Princess to gasp in horror while the fallen angel and Satan remained stoic, though they did seem more tense at the knowledge. We've already taken steps to rectifying that with their new training program, but until we address the core issue, then Issei will still be a danger to himself. And that's not even considering whether or not he'd be facing any opponents that can kill him instantly or have a plan to do so. Azazel continued, glancing over to the subject of their talk. Issei was seeming to have a crisis while Riaz cradles his head, her mouth moving like she was whispering soothing words into his ears. I suppose we can put his training on pause while we help him sort this mess out. Since the next game is actually an ambush by the old Satan faction and you offered to handle it, we can afford to do so. Finding someone that can be in the know and help with this might be difficult though, Surzek said, rubbing his chin in thought as he reviewed the many possibilities of people he could recruit and dismissing many. I might have an idea we could try. Ichigo started, gaining everyone's attention. Squad 4 is the division in charge of healing, mainly as a hospital focused on surgery and medicine. However, during the peacetime of the last 10 years, Captain Onohana has expanded that by having a number of her squad study mental health and therapy practices in regards to those issues. We can have one of them assist with this. There was a pause with Azazel and Surzek giving him raised eyebrows, silently asking him seriously, if it makes either of you feel better, you can stand in with him to make sure we don't do anything painful or traumatizing this time. Their looks didn't waver. On purpose, Ichigo finally admitted. That's the issue, Surzek said, leaning forward. Too often your measures prove less than desirable despite the successes that they yield. Hence the supervision my knight performs, which I'm on the fence about considering his reports of your particular methods. I hear he still rubs his neck on occasion. I believe he claimed it as the closest I've been to death in a long time, Azazel added, thinking back to when he listened to Akita reflecting on the incident. And how can we be sure this isn't just another attempt at testing something with Issei? Ichigo paused before taking out his phone and started calling Urahara. Kisuke, is there anything else you planned on testing out? I know you have ears on this meeting and don't try to deny it. Azazel and Surzek's mouths twisted in annoyance while Riaz and Issei started scanning each wall with a paranoid frenzy. Okay, send Aiken and have him explain it, the commander said with sigh before ending the call. Give them a minute, he said, taking his tea and downing it. Excuse me, Ichigo started before the same soldat from earlier came in, this time with a bottle filled with a glowing brown liquid and several hand-sized glasses. Sir, your cousin ordered us to bring you this brandy in the event you mentioned Captain Urahara, he said, setting down the glasses before pouring them half full. Made from apples harvested from the fruit-bearing dragons. Surzek and Azazel took their glasses and calmly examined their drinks. That Ichigo immediately downed. Delicious, and was just what I needed, he said as the sliding doors of the dangai opened, revealing a man with spiky black hair, a tired expression, and 4 spikes poking out of his forehead, holding a wooden box and dressed in the standard Shinigami uniform with a white overcoat. Hello, third seat Aiken. Sir? The Squad 12 member greeted with a nod, before placing the box before the gathered leaders and opening it to reveal a glass ball. This is a prototype the captain is interested in testing, a memory projector, he said before touching the ball, causing it to glow and making a holographic image appear above it. The image of looking over data spreadsheets. The idea is that it links with the person touching it and projects the memories of that person. Either consciously thought of or unconsciously. We need more tests. Maybe it can help with the therapy," he suggested, making Ichigo look back to the Satan and fallen angel as they looked to each other. "Issei, this is up to you, but I'll be with you each step of the way," Azazel said while Issei looked to Reyes, almost begging her to be there too. She smiled and was about to say something before Ichigo spoke up. "Sir Zekis, I think Reyes needs to take some private lessons on being an effective leader," he said, making Reyes tense and glare at the Shinigami while the Satan silently asked for an explanation. Taking into account the matter with Kiba and this recent revelation with Issei, we can fully determine Reyes' take as a leader. Ichigo poured another glass of brandy for himself and lifted it up. She prefers overwhelming power, gathering quality people, but forgetting to properly nurture them beyond the most immediate circumstances with raiding games. She showers them in genuine love and kindness, so they become loyal to her and ease their past traumas. But she doesn't try to understand them. Like dressing a stab wound with a few wrappings of gauze when a broken shard is still inside. It's fine to treat the surface wound, but one must still address the core injury. Ichigo turned his attention to Reyes again, who flinched. Her entire peerage seems to have similar baggage, and none of it was addressed until recently. Sir Sechus took a drink of his liquor, an act mirrored by Azazel and the Soul Reaper. "I have to agree, Sir Sechus," the fallen angel admitted. "The training I assigned to half of her peerage was about dealing with their personal issues. Maybe we should take advantage of this respite we have, for their sakes." The Lucifer looked to his comrades, then to his sister, who looked conflicted before giving a determined nod. The devil sighed before looking at Ichigo. "If she cries again because of you, we're going to have to fight." The meeting ended soon after that, and the group split off. Sir Sechus returning to the Devil's Netherworld to get some more work done, while the Ichigo brought Azazel and the Grimoire peerage back to Soul Society. Once there, he sent out a message through a small flock of the black hell butterflies. After a few seconds, several of them returned, flying about the different members of the group with Ichigo telling them all to follow the butterflies. Issei's therapy. "Welcome Issei Hayadu and Sir Azazel. I'm Squad 4 Captain Retsu Anohana," the woman greeted as the pair made their way to their destination, a building in the SRDI vicinity. The room they were led to was wide and seemed ready for combat training rather than therapy. Anohana greeted the two with a kind motherly smile, wearing her captain's uniform but returned her hair braid to cover the scar on her chest. "I am the one that will help with your therapy." "Whoa, quite the beauty we got," Azazel said with a smirk, giving an appreciative gaze while Issei nodded in agreement. However, there was something about her smile and expression that made them resist any attempt at undressing her in their minds. "So, how are you planning this exactly?" Anohana gestured for them to get closer as she moved to the center of the room, the floor opening to allow a glass ball on a pedestal to rise up. "I was planning on having him bring up several key moments of his life over the past few months and giving another perspective on it, starting with his date with Rainier," she said as they gathered around the ball, Issei tensing up with his body refusing to move. His left hand starting to shake as a part of him wanted to reach out and touch the memory projector. But something in him was actively fighting against him reliving that memory. He jumped in shock as he felt Anohana gently take his hand and held it in front of the ball, just out of actual contact. "It can be something else first, Issei, if that is more comfortable. But you need to take the first step," she said, letting go as the young devil's hand floated just ahead of the ball. Taking another breath to steady himself, Issei thought back to the day he died and grabbed the memory projector. The sphere glowed with light as the image took form from Issei's point of view. It showed Rainier in her human disguise, wearing a white top over a short black dress, walking next to him through a busy street. Issei's first date playing out for all to see, looking through clothes and accessories before heading to a small cafe to enjoy a parfait and a melon soda float. It got to the falling sunlight of dusk as she stood in front of a fountain, Issei thinking he was going to score an embrace, only for Rainier to reveal her true nature, her derision and cruelty as she mocked his childishness, like playing house with a little kid in their date before running him through with a spear of light and telling him to blame him for giving Issei his sacred gear in the first place. Issei finally tore his hand away, not wanting to relive the memory any longer, as tears fell from his face as he silently cried. Kept thinking about her for a few days, he said, a slight shudder in his breath as he tried to control himself. Trying to convince myself that this didn't happen, that Yuuma didn't do this. But then everything happened and I thought I had come to terms with Yuuma. That greedy fool, Azazel muttered in frustrated disappointment. She was just supposed to watch him, but wanted to make a name for herself. She also just wanted to hurt you, Issei, Anohana said, giving a slight frown at what they just watched. I've known many people in my life, and those that are most desperate to feel strong are often the most cruel with it when given the chance. The Shinigami and the devil looked to each other. It was unnecessary and cruel because she likely understood that she herself was actually pathetic and refused to accept it. And the date? Issei asked. Was it as boring and bland as she claimed? For her, probably. The captain responded, making the red dragon hang his head. But she was also wearing a false identity and went into this with low expectations being hurting you. There's also the facts that 1. This was your first actual attempt at a date, and 2. You knew very little of her and her genuine interests. Both factor in your elation at having won and her false identity and longing to play you. Hearing that, Issei brought his head back up to look at Anohana, who was smiling kindly again. You can be forgiven for how it went, especially since a proper first date should be about getting to know someone better or held after you knew that person's interests enough to show them an enjoyable time, like your date with Rias. That made Issei feel a tad better, evidenced by his smile. Then again, that was more her taking you out, and you just went along with everything. The words manifested as arrows and stabbed into him. And with that, we should probably move on to the next matter in relation to your love life, the captain suggested while gesturing for Issei to touch the sphere again. Rias has shown her interest in you. Asia is clearly infatuated as well, and even Kaneko and Akino seem to want to catch your interest. So why is it that you always seem to keep a certain degree of separation between yourself and them? Hey, I want nothing more than to claim Prez's Viagi. He tried arguing before realizing that failed to call Rias by name. Don't think, feel, Retsu advised to the dragon. Let the device find the answers. Issei nodded and reached out, thinking about whether Rias and Asia loved and how he felt about it. The first image that appeared had Rainier taunting Issei's date as pathetically boring, the same as that Raigai copy of her based on Issei's memories from earlier. It wasn't too surprising, it was his first attempt, and she did everything to crush his will. But then it switched to a new image, Asia in a thin dress, thanking Issei for being her friend, as the life drained from her being after her sacred gear was extracted, and Issei's desperate pleas to the biblical god to save her. The next image showed a tall man with short blonde hair, wearing burgundy breathe and blazer over a mostly unbuttoned dress shirt, and he was beating the SHT out of Issei. His first fight with the Phoenix boy, Retsu thought, recalling the incident only because of the bloodline power of the clan and the stagnant complacency it would breed. Though it appears Issei suffers from a lack of confidence rather than overconfidence, the captain concluded as the final memory was defeat from Saji in the last raiding game, cursing out Issei and spelling out just how pathetic the young devil was. When he pulled his hand away this time, tears had started to run down his face once more. So, you just feel unworthy of their love because you are too weak? Is that it? Anohana asked in a tone that spoke of kindness, while her hand went for her sword hilt. I couldn't save Asia, I had to sacrifice my arm to save the woman I tell myself I love, and my drive doesn't even compare to Saji's, Issei admitted, wiping his eyes with a shuddering breath. I really am a pathetic loss. Block. Retsu immediately said as she pulled her Zanpakuto from its sheath and swung it at the devil. Issei barely had enough time to summon his gauntlet, bringing it up to shield him from the blade's edge, while tilting it in a way to diffuse the force of the captain's swing. The result still sent him sliding back with his arm throbbing from the attack. If you were still at the same level as you were when you fought Riser, you'd be dead. Retsu explained to the devil in a tone that put both him and Azazel on edge for a moment before she sheathed her blade. What I saw was someone that has been on the bottom rung and is now trying to improve himself. Issei and Azazel relaxed as Anohana walked over to them, the sense of danger fading away again. You continue to doubt yourself not because you're weak, but because you haven't seen how much stronger you've actually become. But Saji was right, wasn't he? Issei countered, thinking back to the other pawn's words. Despite everything, I've made no real effort to. You've made effort, but not the same level of effort, the captain stated, interrupting the devil and leaving him confused. Much like how your sacred gear operates, you've proven slow to start, but your improvements have essentially doubled in short order. The main issue there is that the resulting costs have always taken a heavy toll on you, both physically and mentally. Asia's death, however temporary, has clearly left a scar on your heart. She gently took hold of Issei's shoulder and pulled him back to the sphere. That scar is a reminder that people die, even the most kind and innocent, if those close to them are too weak to protect them. This is something you already started to address, but you had yet to truly consider how far was really needed to go in that. Your defeat to Riser made you ready to sacrifice anything for power, but even if it was for a noble end, you would end up with the mindset that it would be fine if only you paid a price, regardless of how anyone else might feel on the matter. Your fight with Saji made you realize the difference in wills between you, and thus you began to question yourself again. That's. Issei tried to think of something to argue against those claims, but her words were making sense. You were once human, you have the spirit of a dragon, and became a devil. Why are you so content? Ritsu challenged, confusing the red dragon. You've seen your limitations, you know your goals, you understand the steps you need to take, so why do you hesitate? Issei again tried to come up with something, anything, that didn't seem like an admission of his weakness. Sorry, that was a little harsh. My point, Issei, is this. Out of everyone who has any amount of say in your longing to court Rias and maybe Asia, you are the only one that doesn't think you deserve their love. You also know what you need to do in order to change that. Issei nodded in agreement. I need to get stronger, he said, gaining a look of resolve in his eyes. Strong enough to keep Rias and my friends safe and happy. Anohana nodded in approval. Very good, let's get started, she said, unsheathing her blade once more and surprising Issei again. I suggest you follow her instruction very carefully, partner. The devil heard D-Drag say. I get the sense that she was a fighter first and a healer second. Before Issei could ask anything, the captain was in front of him with her blade coming straight for his neck. He blocked with his gauntlet and was sent flying back again, his arm rattling from the blow. Don't get distracted, Ritsu advised, undoing her hair braid. I sometimes forget to hold back when I'm excited. Both Issei and Azazel got a sense of dread as Retsu turned into Yakiru. Rias's lesson. The crimson-haired heiress of the Gremory clan followed her black butterfly to a large two-story facility of the white stone that made up the majority of the Serite with shining bronze-colored tile roofs, a nameplate reading Shino Academy Main. A part of her wanted to geek out over all the traditional-looking aesthetics, but she was dissuaded from doing so with the way the people around her seemed to act with her presence. It wasn't fear or hate, more like a mix of apathy and condescension. Ultimately, the most unsettling feeling she's had in a long time. For the first time in a long time, she felt alone and vulnerable. She wished she had Issei with her, or Akino, or Asia, or Kiba, or Kaneko. She would even accept Sona or Sursex's with all of his unrestrained doting, someone to ease these feelings. She thought she was ready after Ichigo, and her brother warned her that despite everything so far, many of Soul Society still did not have a positive views of devils after what the Nabarius clan did. Hate was one thing, apathy was far more painful. She shook her head harshly and slapped her cheeks, forcing herself out of her head as she focused on her coming lessons. As she crossed the entryway into the grounds of Shino Academy, a woman with black hair tied in a loose bun with an asymmetrical design and blue-violet eyes behind small no-framed glasses flashed before her. Hello, Miss Gremory. I am Nanao Eyes, the Shinigami stated, introducing herself to the devil. Nanao was wearing a similar outfit to those of the students Rias saw, the white shihakusho with blue breathe for the boys and red for the girls, though Nanao was wearing black breathe with a black haori. Follow me, I'll take you to headmasters, Kayaraku and Yukitake. Rias nodded and followed, taking in the sights and the sounds, the clacking of wood and various yelling with some sounding like chants, while the rest were lectures and gossip. And more than a few times she heard some talking about purging Japan of the foreign supernatural beings. She failed to restrain the sigh that escaped her lips, something Nanao heard. Is everything okay, Miss Gremory? She asked while they continued walking through the building's halls. Just getting a sad reminder of how loathed the devils are, Rias admitted sadly. I grew up hearing stories about Japan from my brother's knight, Okita Soji, and I wanted nothing more than to come and live in it. Sure, most of the time I was in what was considered devil territory, and the most I've gotten to explore was Kyoto for a field trip. But I haven't felt like I wasn't welcomed. Not since today. Nanao hummed, thinking the matter over. Many of older souls are from eras before Japan was willing to be more open to other cultures, and the Nekishu incident 10 years ago did the devils no favors. But we can attribute this to the fact that we've been isolated from the other factions for almost the entirety of our history. She guessed as they proceeded along. Truthfully, the Gotai's current unity is only really possible because of Captain Commander Kurosaki, Captain Ishida, and the efforts of Headmaster Kairaku back when he was the Captain Commander. Really? Riaz asked, surprised after knowing how connected Ichigo was to the angels and even the Greek pantheon. Indeed. Only little more than a decade ago did the Gotai incorporate the Arankar, Quincy, and other spiritual ability users. Nanao explained, slipping into a history lecture. Since its creation over 1,000 years ago by the first head captain, Genrusai Shichikuni Yamamoto, the original Gotai 13 only consisted of those that had the power to become soul reapers. For the years that followed, they battled the hollows that devoured the souls of those that had not passed on yet, and the Quincy that disrupted the balance of souls we are meant to protect. It remained that way until one of Soul Society's most vile criminals decided to overthrow the system, setting up the conditions that led to the BRTH of Commander Kurosaki, the perfect union of Shinigami, Hollow, and Quincy. Commander Yamamoto held his position as head captain of the Gotai for over 1,000 years because no one else could challenge his might. But he saw the potential in Commander Kurosaki and began training him to succeed him once war with Aizen became inevitable. As he grew in power, Ichigo managed to convince the Hollows to serve him as king after besting Aizen, allowing the creation of Division 16, the Arankar division made up of Hollows that were given Soul Reaper powers. The Quincy were another matter since the majority of them were fanatically devoted to their original king and consisted of the more violent and depraved who were happy to kill in his twisted name. Sounds like a few exorcists I've heard of. Riaz interjected, getting a quick smack to the head. Quiet during class, Nanao said before blushing and adjusting her glasses. Sorry, I forgot this wasn't a classroom lecture and I tend to be a little strict. No, it's all right, Gremory quickly said. Keep going. I'm interested to hear the rest. Nanao gave a small smile before clearing her throat. Anyway, the Quincy were originally bound to the old king by their very souls, and in turn worship it as a god. Through very careful means, we found a way to sever those bonds and free the more pragmatic of the Quincy willing to see the monster their king was and rebel against it. In the end, Ichigo unleashed a terrifying new ability that removed the Quincy king from existence and ended the conflict. We know there was a king, but nothing else. During the preparation for the war with the Quincy, Commander Yamamoto had some of our agents leave Japan to seek out anything we could find on the Quincy and even recruited some foreign allies, 2 of whom being old allies of the commander. They agreed to take Commander Kurosaki under their wing after Commander Yamamoto passed, instructing him to travel across Europe for his training before returning to Soul Society to become a captain and eventually succeed as the 3rd and current captain commander of the 16 court guard squads. Whoa, Riaz breathed out. Wait, 3rd? Yes. Originally, Yamamoto's chosen successor was to be Headmaster Kairaku, but he decided he would just hold the position until he thought Ichigo was ready for it. He prefers the peaceful life. Nanao explained as they reached a set of double doors with a nameplate reading Headmasters Kairaku and Yukitake, barely avoiding a man and woman that ran down the hall and, competing over something? Ignore them. Nanao said as she opened one of the doors. Headmasters? I brought Miss Gremory. Come in, take a seat, we'll be with you shortly. A kindly but tired voice called out as Riaz entered the office. Inside she found 2 men sitting on opposite sides of a table covered in stacks of paperwork. The one on her left seemed middle-aged with a shadowing beard, long and wavy brown hair, wearing a pink kimono over a similar outfit to Nanao's and 2 hairpins in his ponytail, and the one on the right had a pale complexion but a gentle visage with long white hair, wearing the same black and white teacher's outfit with his Haori reading headmaster. On the walls were some shelves with books and scrolls, a few flower vases, a couch, But the most prominent thing that had the devil's attention was a calligraphy painting of a pillar of fire with what seemed like a person inside. Riaz took her seat and waited while the two men continued their work. "Nanao, could you have this delivered to the Kaido training hall? This might help with those problem students," the man in the flower kimono said. "Yes, Headmaster Kairaku," Nanao said as she took the paper and flashed away. "I'd lose my head if not for her," the man said, stretching himself out before standing up. "I'll go first with her, Jushiro. Try not to overwork yourself." "I won't, and go easy on the girl," the other headmaster said with a chuckle while Kairaku pulled out a rather large board game box. "Come along, Miss Gremory, let's play a game," Kairaku said as he walked out of the office, a confused Riaz following him before reasoning that the game must be part of her lesson. The two made their way to an empty library room, Kairaku quickly claiming a table and setting down the box before opening it. "I've heard you're familiar with chess and the like, so hopefully you won't find this too complicated." He started taking out the contents of the box. "You don't have to worry about that. What are the rules, sir?" Riaz said as she studied the various pieces. 30 figurines with different emblems on them that resembled a sword, a staff, and a fist, a small deck of blank white cards, sets of dice, a small crystal ball stand, and a large game board. "Here's how it goes. Each side gets 15 pieces, 5 for each of the 3 combat types of technique, magic, and power, to try and create their desired team. Once you have your team, you place the piece on the card while infusing your Ryoryoku, or magic in your case, into the cards and roll your dice set. The numbers determine the average stats of each piece, while your supplied energy gets a random attribute and personality. The cards tell you everything about your pieces, and I advise that you keep an eye on everything and address any issue that may come up. Once you're ready, we both supply our energy into this crystal to get our field and hide our pieces from the other player. From there, we mentally direct and control the pieces as they move about the board, only seeing the opponent's pieces when our pieces can see them. Makes sense?" "I think," Riaz relented, trying to wrap her mind around all the mechanics that went into the game. Kairaku smiled patiently before removing the crystal from the board. "How about a few practice rounds until you get the hang of this?" he suggested, gathering all of his pieces and, basically, activating them. "That would be appreciated, sir," the devil said as she mimicked his actions and got ready for the first round. With Ichigo. "Thanks for looking into that, Sokka," the shogun said, his phone at his ear as he called the London offices of Soul Society. Since the QO summit, Ichigo had doubled down on research into dragons, particularly any with notable history and myths, trying to figure out any advantage he could get in case they appear as enemies or to track down anything that might be useful for materials. Unfortunately, there was nothing about off-eyes, so he had to content himself on something else. So, did they agree? Parting with any part of one of the Heavenly Two is a very costly endeavor. The head of the Patchworks division of Wingbind said, "These body parts aren't cheap or abundant. What are you offering in exchange for this Claw of Albion, and why do you want it?" "I can offer you a collection of scales from Tiamat," Ichigo offered, though she might be more goddess than dragon at this point. Then again, that might make them more valuable. As for why I want the claw, Tiamat says she needs it for something that should be an asset to both the Alliance and dragonkind as a whole. There was a pause as the hybrid said that. "Send us periodic reports after you receive it. Beyond that, we accept the trade. We'll be sending you Albion's claw tomorrow in exchange for 20 of Tiamat's scales," the voice said before the call was ended. Ichigo set down his phone and walked over to the balcony of his office, looking out to the mountain Tiamat had constructed to serve as her roost in Soul Society. "What the heck are you planning, Tiamat?" the shogun asked before opening a gate to the royal realm. He needed to go for a walk. Back with Riaz. "Brain. Hurt." The devil groaned, lying face down on the table in the library. After a few practice plays to get used to how to play the game, they played for real. And Riaz was soundly defeated each time. There were no turns, just continuous movement controlled by their wills. It was fascinating to see them move by her mental command, but she learned quickly that trying to control everything moving at the speed of her thoughts was far more difficult than she expected. On top of that, The factors of stamina and morale played into the game, and she still didn't understand how to control those despite Kairaku's advice before he left her to practice alone. How do you usually keep up your team's morale? She never worried about that in a fight before, and how would it translate in this game anyway? Having trouble? She heard Yukatek say, raising her head to see the other headmaster taking a seat across from her. With him was a tea kettle, a few cups, and a lot of snacks and sweets that seemed like a siren call to her. Here, try to relax, he suggested, pouring her a cup of green herbal tea with a heavy lavender scent while pushing a few cookies toward her. Take a moment and collect yourself. Riaz immediately took him up on that offer, breathing in the tea's soothing scent before taking a drink. That game of shunsui's has always been difficult, for anyone that tried to play it, the old man said, taking a piece between his fingers and looking it over. The intention was to make it as close to a real-time battle scenario for strategy training. I can certainly see that. Riaz relented while eating a cookie, letting the tea and sugar work their charm on her. I'm still so used to chess that I keep forgetting about the other variables in this game. She picked up one of the cards, currently blank, but she could still see the morale numbers drop. Stamina is easy to solve, but I keep forgetting about it. But what's this about morale? How do I keep it high? She asked with a hint of frustration. Ask them what's going on and talk to them. Yukatek told her simply, earning a dry look from the devil. Okay, fine, she said, relenting as she started another round. So, how does everyone feel? She asked, feeling a little silly before her eyes bulged at seeing the cards reflecting some form of answers of her pieces being ready to serve. It was that simple? She roared in frustration. Shunsui has a habit of partially explaining things to his opponents. The older man told her with a smile, finding the matter funny. His particular power basically turns games into the rules of combat, like tag or red light, green light as a style of fighting. He has to make sure his opponent knows the rules of the game, but he's very selective of that information to ensure he remains at the advantage. He still hasn't gotten out of it since he's fully aware that he can be recalled to active service at any time. But he's retired, right? Would Lord Kurosaki really force him out of it when he's so strong? Riaz asked, surprised by that idea. Reyes, my dear friend, was one of the first graduates of this academy to reach the rank of captain back when our teacher was the leader of the Gotai, and MSTR intended Shunsui to succeed him for a very long time. He'd make every effort to ensure the peaceful option was taken while doing his duty as a Shinigami, but nothing was too far if it meant victory. He understands the burdens and responsibilities of leadership better than most of the Gotai and was all too eager to pass it down to Ichigo the moment he could. Yukatek explained while Riaz gave rapt attention to him. He knew every major figure under his command and how best to utilize them, made sure to understand them and say what he needed to say in order to keep them in high spirits, but also made sure they knew his word was law when necessary. He passed down the mantle of Captain Commander because he made sure Ichigo understood all those same lessons. Difference is, Ichigo needed to learn to stop shouldering everything himself. You need to be more proactive. I keep hearing that, Riaz admitted, finishing her tea, and she thought back to everything that has happened since meeting Issei. I will be. Right, one more treat then back to training, she said before reaching for nothing. The snacks were gone. What the? Thanks for the snacks, Ukiji. Riaz's eyes shot over to the Kenpachi child, Yakiru Onahana, holding all of the snacks before flashing away. The devil looked on in shocked disbelief while Jushiro just smiled and waved. Ah, Tilda. Happy children heal the heart, he said while Riaz just pouted angrily. Later that day, Riaz was standing next to the Senkamen gate that would lead back to Kuo, a copy of Kairaku game with her to practice with, as she waited for Issei and Azazel since it'd be rude to leave without them. Her wait was relatively short as she had only been waiting for 10 minutes before the fallen angel and her pawn made their appearance. She turned and felt her jaw drop when she saw both of them being led toward her by another Shinigami. I'm sorry, but what happened? She demanded, running up to the two of them, both of their eyes wrapped in bandages, and scaring the devil heiress. Riaz, is that you? Issei asked, reaching out to her. It's so good to hear your voice. Gremory felt a measure of joy at hearing her favorite pawn finally call her by name, but that was superseded by the worry she had. Well, Riaz, Azazel started, What happened was, Issei went right into training after his therapy session, since he resolved to get much stronger, and started sparring with a captain of the court guard squads. I remember that, the red dragon said as Riaz took his hand. Please tell what's happening. I can't actually feel my hands. The devil looked at Issei in shock again. For good reason, the fallen angel added. Ichigo let his killing intent do the work. Anohana was more hands-on, and he can't remember what happened. His body certainly does. Made him practice swordplay, magic, and hand-to-hand fighting until they broke and bled. Made them completely numb while he recovered. Riaz decided to test that by taking Issei's hand and putting it on her left BRST, feeling some anxiety when his fingers didn't move. Riaz, are you doing something with my hand? He asked, feeling his arm move and some pressure, but nothing else. Nothing important, she said, refusing to break his heart in that moment. Anyways, this happened because Issei needed to learn a strong lesson, apparently, and I got caught in the crossfire. Hence, Azazel gestured to his own face. I see. Well, come on then. I'll lead the way, Riaz said as the Senkaman activated and a black butterfly appeared to guide them. By the way, we'll be coming back over the next 2 weeks, she announced. We've got to take advantage and get as much training and practice as we can. As a team, she said with a smile, unknowingly filling Issei with dread. Royal Realm. Gra! Ichigo roared out as he suddenly appeared, shirtless and dripping wet with sweat and water as he fell to his knees. That seemed heavier than usual. He breathed out, desperately trying to catch his breath after walking down the Arazu Sando. As his breathing settled, his body glowed with a light emanating from his chest. My fault for gathering more things I want to protect. The Arazu Sando was created to test those capable of shouldering the burden of all existence like the Soul King, but had since become Ichigo's preferred training method. Once only representing the world of the living, Soul Society, and Hukomundo, while the Soul King was sealed, now reflects the weight of everything Ichigo wishes to protect, as designed by the Soul King himself. A weight that only grows with every bond the hybrid makes. This calls for a trip to Whitebone Hell, then the Gatondon, Ichigo decided, taking a step before hearing the Soul King's order. Bring me Rukia and Kenpachi. Omik. Don't anger Anohana. Issei was covered in a sheen of sweat with several cuts over his body, his upper clothes hanging on by threads under the mercy of the cold-eyed woman before him. It was jarring to see the motherly Anohana swch into such a ruthless and efficient combatant, something his partner warned him about as she forced him to push beyond what he thought he was capable of. His left arm was covered in the red gauntlet of his boosted gear, and he was holding the holy sword Escalon, a straight sword with 3 notches on both sides near the base and a gold guard that resembled dragon claws. He attempted to use his doubling ability, and Anohana cut off and reattached his arm before making it clear to not do that again. His movements were still clumsy, but the captain gave him all the help he was going to get from her already in how to sword fight. I just gotta get one hit, he thought as he fought to block attacks that seemed effortless to Anohana. There's gotta be a way to distract her, he thought, before getting an epiphany. Right, her, he said before charging his power. She made it clear she wanted him to fight dirty, so he would. He rushed at he and she casually deflected his blade swing, but he did touch her Shihakusho. Dress break, he shouted, snapping his fingers and destroying Anohana's clothes. You're my, he called out, thinking she was distracted by her sudden NDTY. What he got was her blade's tip literally pressing against his heart. Good attempt, she said, still emotionless and without shame of her naked form while holding her blade and ready to pierce through. It would work on any shy or innocent maiden. But your mistake was assuming I was either. She pulled the blade from his chest as he dropped to his knees, his mind flashing back to Rainier killing him before Anohana dropped down to his level and got her motherly expression again. You're making a lot of progress, Issei. You should be proud, she said as her hands glowed with healing Kaido as she healed the hole in his chest. I'll make sure Riaz pampers you a lot for your strong work. Thanks, Cap, Issei started as she got back to her feet, only to stop when she cut through his eyes. Ah, he screamed as he grasped his bleeding face. Don't worry, this is an easy fix, Ritsu said before turning her smiling face to Azazel, who was paralyzed with fear. This whole training session he watched as Issei was killed and revived repeatedly by the woman. So quickly he never noticed he died even once, and now her focus was on him. "I saw," he started saying before he felt something pierce his eyeballs. "Ah. Now to wipe both of your memories of this scene," she said, lowering her arm that shot the needle like Kaido spells into Azazel's eyes. "After all, my husband is the only man that gets to see me like this." Spoken with an innocent smile and a blush, while the two men grasped their bleeding eyes. Setting the trap. Reverse London, 13 days before the next game. The hustle and bustle of the city had grown as of late. More witches and wizards were flying about as the numbers of Wingbind grew, an increase of draconic entities and varieties brought on by increased study, and the preparations for any conflict with the Kado's brigade, if what Soul Society told them was true. The increased activity over the trees and buildings was the main view for one man sitting at a balcony table at a cafe. He had shaggy blonde hair with black sunglasses, wearing a white dress shirt with a blue undershirt and baggy greenish-brown brief, while a large briefcase sat by his feet. This was Harry Shake, the head of the billionaire's accounting division of Wingbind, enjoying a cup of tea while reading over reports and waiting for his guest, another cup of tea sitting on the opposite side. Eventually his patience was answered with a sound of static. "You called this morning to set up this exchange," he said, setting the papers down to face his guest. "I like taking my time, Ichigo." The hybrid in question was wearing a white shirt with a stylized 15 on the front with a red hoodie and black brief while holding onto his own much slimmer briefcase. "Sorry, Harry." The captain commander returned as he took his seat, picking up his mug and taking a sip of the steaming flavored water. "But we are approaching a deadline." "Indeed." The wizard agreed before pulling up his briefcase, laid it on its side on the table, and opened it to reveal several wrapped bricks of white powder. Shaved down to a powder, but it retains every last bit of magical energy and potency. The Soul Reaper reached into the case and pulled out one of the bricks, feeling the residual power still thrumming inside of every last grain. He gave a nod of satisfaction before putting it back in the case before putting his own the table, opening it to reveal 20 hand-sized glowing blue scales. "Shiny," Harry said before picking one up and examining it, pulling out a pocket magnifying glass to get a better glimpse at it. After another few seconds he put his tool in his pocket and returned the scale to the briefcase before flashing Ichigo a thumbs up. "Pleasure doing business," the hybrid said as they took the other's briefcase. "To a brighter future." He held up his tea and declared before drinking as a sudden presence caught his attention. "Is that Tannen?" he asked, believing his Pesquisa picked up on the dragon devil. "Maybe," Harry answered as he finished his tea. "Someone on your side sent us the means to summon him and suggested we work out some kind of deal with him. A steady supply of new dragon materials to work with in exchange for helping him cultivate more food for the dragons in his territory. I believe his name was Kisuk, and so far we've seen a 20% profit increase." Ichigo decided that he needed to review the paperwork and reports for the last month to see if he missed this, and to beach slap Yorihara into a coma anyway. Soul Society, Squad 11 Kendo Hall. The room was bare of decorations, making room only for racks of wooden swords of varying length and weight either by craft or enchantment. The members of the squad had little need for anything else but their melee prowess, focusing on furthering that one skill as the main infantry unit of the Gotai. As such, it was the perfect environment for Issei and Kiba to have their sparring matches. "Come on, Issei, you're only defending," the Gremory Knight called out, Bakken in hand as he made another swing that Issei managed to block on sheer instinct. Both peerage members were only wearing their brief and were covered in sweat. Kiba in a light sheen while Issei was dripping and had a few welts start to appear. "I'm still getting used to the basics, Kiba." The red dragon managed to breathe out, readying himself for the next round. Today was dedicated to swordplay practice for Issei, and the Gremory Knight was happy to assist his dear friend in his training. As such, the two of them and Okita were directed towards Squad 11 after asking about the ideal environment for that training. At first Issei tried listening to their advice, adjusting his sword and stance, his footwork and swings, everything they shouted as the two fought. But only one voice echoed in his mind. "Understand your sacred gear and yourself." Arthur's voice echoed in his head as he shifted to anything that felt natural to him. At that point, their voices faded as the two focused on their own sparring match. Each bout slowly showed the progress of the red dragon, coming closer and closer to understanding his own relationship with a sword. They kept this going until Kiba's swift motions spun around Issei's sword hand and knocked his practiced sword out of his hand for the 5th time. "You're getting better, Issei," Kiba said while his partner rubbed his bruising wrist, a small smirk of satisfaction appearing on his face. "You almost seem like a changed man. I keep expecting you to come up with something melons related, but I don't know when." "Certainly not against you," Issei returned with a smile. "You have no melons to speak of." Kiba felt himself chuckle before hearing his stomach growl. "We should probably hit the springs and get lunch," the pair planned as they did some cool-down stretches. "Mr. You want to?" The night started as he looked over to Okita, finding him casually resting on his sword surrounded by unconscious Shinigami with Ikaku holding a glowing hand over parts of his body. "What happened?" "He kicked our butt, that's what," the squad lieutenant said while the Shinsengumi member nodded in admittance. "Gotta admit, his skill is something else. Now I'm more PSS that he didn't die and join us in Soul Society." "Well, I have more fun as a devil," the Lucifer Knight said with a friendly smile, making Ikaku smirk. "Yeah, that's the main point, isn't it? Enjoying yourself." The bald Soul Reaper agreed as he rose to his feet. "You guys are welcome to train here again. We could use the entertainment and motivation. Can't disappoint the captain by slacking off while he's training." "And he's the strongest Shinigami, right?" Okita asked, confusing Issei. "I thought that was Commander Kurosaki," the red dragon stated, gaining everyone's attention. "Commander Kurosaki is the most powerful of the Gotai. Of that there's no question," Ikaku started explaining. "He has the most spiritual power and the mastery of various abilities to keep him at the top. But Captain Zaraki is the strongest, as in physical power. To use your terms, he'd be Soul Society's strongest rook piece, I believe." "Interesting," Okita said, getting a sense of disappointment at missing a chance to test his strength against someone close to the one that made his remember the chill of death. "Oh well, we can put that off till later. Kiba, Issei, let's go," the Elder Knight declared with the Gremory members already heading for the door, opening it and shivering at the sudden chill. "Hey, is it me? Oh, or is something very wrong here?" Issei asked, shivering as the trio watched the snow falling. Shadow Karakura, Silburn Underground Training Hall. Despite her longing to train her entire peerage within the confines of the Soul Society for the next 2 weeks, Rias and her peerage were subject to their own separate training schedules that Azazel and someone named Urahara drew up for them. As such, Issei and Kiba were currently in the Soul Society to practice swordplay. Kaneko was sent to Kyoto to practice senjutsu, and Rias herself was brought to Shadow Karakura to get more combat experience. So here she was flying around an arena of fast, ever-shifting sand, sparring against a roughly equal opponent, both dressed in black skin-tight bodysuits. And this opponent was one that she's all too happy to vent her frustrations on. "There!" the Gremory heiress shouted, spying Sona on the ground as a tower of sand shot the Citri heiress into the air. Rias pointed her hand to her opponent and quickly charged a blast of magical energy, aiming to blow off the top of the tower. Sona heard the shout and immediately reacted, gathering her magic to her feet and using it to jump off the tower and straight toward the ground. Rias kept her focus on her opponent and immediately bolted toward Sona, aiming to intercept and blast her at a much closer range. As they neared the ground, they felt their instincts scream danger, immediately making them divert their flight paths as the sand erupted into spikes around them. "Diamenet," Rias cursed as she just narrowly escaped getting hit by one spire. Through her suit's left thigh flashed a light pink to indicate that it did brush against her. "Not fast enough," she growled as she generated magic shields and tried to deflect a few as she flew out of the danger. She caught glimpses of Sona, skating around it all with water concentrated at her feet. She heard the sound of shifting sand and turned to see one of the spires heading straight toward her and got an idea. She aimed herself for Sona and tucked her feet up, generating another magic shield and waited. The shockwave reverberated throughout her body as she went from standing still to rocketing toward her rival on an intercept course as the Citri twisted around another spike. "Got you," she shouted, just in time to jump off the shield and tackle the other devil. She kept a tight hold as they slammed into a wall of sand that collapsed around them, raining as they fell to the ground with a strong thunk as Sona bore the weight of herself and Rias. The Grimoire, having been cushioned by her opponent, managed to recover and pull herself up. The moment she saw Sona's disheveled and scuffed-up face, Rias's mind went back to their raiding game and how she was utterly humiliated. The Crimson Devil gritted her teeth and punched Sona in the face, feeling a shock race through her hand and arm, but she ignored that in favor of venting. "Part of the mission?" Rias shouted, her knuckles turning red from the force with which she threw her fists from her spot, straddling Sona's torso. "Did you really have to hurt them so badly? Throw away any sense of honor. Treat me like I'm a child?" She kept yelling and punching long after it was clear the fight was over, so focused on delivering her vengeance that she didn't notice the glowing ball that sank into her back before blowing up and blasting her off the Citri Eris. Rias flipped about and tumbled for a bit before rolling to a stop, and a boot lightly stepping on her throat. "That is how you do a sneak attack." Bambi lectured to the devil beneath her heel, while Yuzu flashed in and started tending to Sona, the Kurasaki's hand glowing with healing power. "Not shouting and alerting them the moment you see them." The Explode pulled her foot away and walked over to an empty space and made a holographic console appear before typing in a new command. "No more flying, navigate an ever-shifting maze to find and fight each other." The Quincy ordered while Sona and Rias got to their feet, Sona looking completely healed while Yuzu started on Rias's back. "Was that explosion necessary?" the Grimoire asked while she was being healed. "I teach best by giving examples." Bambietta returned before flashing away, Yuzu soon disappearing as well as walls of sand erupted around the devils. "Round 2, start." The devil shook her head and started looking for a way through the maze. Shadow Karakura, Kurosaki Manor. The Kurosaki Manor was a large 3-story building of dark blue and silver, built shortly after the establishment of Shadow Karakura, as a home for the members of the Kurosaki family. The whole building was a mix of Japanese, Spanish, and German, trying to reflect on the hybrid nature of the owner, especially since this was where most of his family would usually be. It was only in the last 2 years did his children start exploring the world beyond the confines of the various estates they called home to expand their horizons. It had been almost 10 years since any new occupants would be added to the estate, changing with the addition of Seldia Citri. "Nell, is that you?" Serafal called out to her sister-wife, thinking she heard the sound of Discora opening, the devil wearing a business suit while carrying her daughter into the foyer of the manor. Seldia was bundled up in an ice-blue blanket and fish-themed clothes, resting against her mother's chest. As Serafal made her way to the entrance, she found the green-haired Arankar standing there in a green sundress with a smile on her face. "Thanks again for agreeing to watch her, Neliel," the Satan said as she approached her sister. "I've been away from work for too long, and we don't want anyone to get suspicious." "No problem. Besides, it reminds me of when Aberu was a baby," Nell said with an understanding smile as she held out her arms, that she held out for a minute while Serafal made no motion to hand over her baby. "Sira, you have to give her to me if I'm going to babysit." Serafal's response was to put a more secured hold on Seldia. "I don't wanna," she said with a pout. "Can't we do that artificial body and soul thing to have a body double take my place instead? I don't want to leave her," she whined, nuzzling and cradling her baby and eliciting small laughter from the babe. "No, Serafal, we can't. They don't have enough time to make a convincing enough body double anyway. You have to actually go to work," Neliel told her, getting the devil to stick her tongue out at the Arankar. "Fine," Serafal finally said, holding Seldia up to eye level. "Now, sweetie, Mommy has to go away for a while. Be sure to behave yourself for your other mommies until I get back." "'Kay," she said with a smile as her baby cooed happily, making her resolve crumble again. "I don't want to go, Tilda," the devil said with an exaggerated cry as she held onto her baby, making Nell smile as she remembered acting the exact same way. They paused as the doors opened to reveal an exhausted-looking Sona, holding her head. "She's gonna hold on to that grudge for a while," the young Citri groaned out as she walked through the foyer toward the stairs. "Hello, Neliel. Thank you and everyone else for letting me stay here. I'm just gonna take a bath and go to bed, so good night," she said as she walked by, taking a few steps past Serafal before stopping suddenly. She slowly turned, finally noticing that her BLD sister was cradling a baby that looked very much like said sister. "His sister? Wah, what?" she asked, raising a shaking finger. "Oh yeah, I still haven't told anyone," Seraphal said, remembering that there was still a few people out of the loop before smiling to her sister. "This is my daughter, Seldia. Seldia, this is your Aunt Sona." "What did I miss?" Sona asked, her brain trying and failing to process this information. Heaven, dusk of that same day. Ichigo stood in front of large white gate, waiting for Gabriel and her suit so they could depart for Soul Society before determining her main residence in Japan, while taking in the holy splendor of heaven. It wasn't the first time he visited the kingdom among the clouds, but it wasn't often enough that it would bore him. The land, or whatever made up the ground, was a vast field of clouds with a number of stone walkways, with the main one leading to a massive white gate. The buildings beyond the pearly gate were Gothic stone and ivory, all under a bright white ceiling hanging high above the apparent 6 other levels of the White City. It almost reminded him of the divide of the Rukan, Serite, and Royal Realm in the more corrupt years of the Soul Society. Heaven was seemingly less corrupted, but at the same time felt far less free. He was brought out of his musings as the gate slowly opened, revealing the angels he was waiting for. "Ichigo, we're here," Gabriel called out, wearing a white t-shirt with a red heart and a pair of beige briefs that clung to her body and a large brown suitcase. Behind her were 2 women dressed as nuns and also carrying suitcases. One was Griselda Corda, and the other was a taller woman with ash blonde hair and blue eyes and a "Sweet," Ichigo started before covering his mouth before he could shout anything. The other nun seemed to blush and looked away as they came closer to the hybrid. Gabriel seemed confused, and Griselda just seemed to chuckle. "Thanks for picking us up, Ichigo," the seraph said as they got face to face. "These are my suit members, Griselda as my queen," the senior Corda gave a wave, "and my ace, Marana Shadorova." The other nun gave a nervous bow. Lord Shogun," Marana said as a... "I'm sorry, but how have those things not crippled you?" Ichigo asked, pointing to her large chest. The Russian sestra flinched in surprise before shyly looking away. "She's had her whole life to grow and get used to them. That's how," Griselda answered with a smile, finding this humorous while Marana gave a small whine. "Well, hopefully Issei's got a better handle on his melon's obsession." Ichigo sighed out before flicking his wrist and opening a hole into the garganta. "This way, ladies, your chariot to the Soul Society awaits," he said as he took the first few steps into the void dimension, generating a path made of glowing blue light. The angels watched this and sprouted their feathery wings in preparation before taking their tentative steps onto the construct of spiritual energy, not used to the idea or concept, before settling on with their full weights and luggage. Once Ichigo saw that they were ready, he willed the platform of Ryuzi to move, steadily gaining more speed as his passengers adjusted to the shifts, until they reached a point he was well familiar with. "Well, here we are," he said as they slowed down and a new tier opened, just in time for them to fly out. "Welcome to the FCK." "Oh, is it winter here?" Gabriel asked in genuine curiosity as they took in the sight of a Soul Society, coated in a blanket of snow as more gently fell from the sky. "What happened? I was gone for a few hours. What could've?" "Oh right," Ichigo continued, having a mini freakout before remembering something that happened last night. "She's been practicing," he said, looking up at the sky toward the royal realm, before returning his vision to the streets of the Rukan and Serite. "So has Toshiro and Esdeath, it seems," he said, finding the Squad 10 captain and lieutenant using their Zanpakuto to manipulate the snow into forming ice sculptures, from the look of it. He took another cursory glance over the streets, finding adults clearing paths and children playing. "Well, at least things are still peaceful," he said, finding the positives in the current situation. "Still, I should address this sooner rather than later, but I can't just abandon you 3 here to do it." Ichigo brainstormed his options before realizing something. "I need to message someone." Shino Academy's Zanjutsu Training Hall. The sound of clashing steel rang out as the 2 warriors inside did their battle under the careful watch of Kairaku, Zenobia in her Shino Academy uniform and Irina wearing her exorcist battle uniform. The brave saint had her wings out and was wielding a glowing katana, moving at speeds that seemed somewhat unnatural for her. Zenobia, meanwhile, had in her hands a broadsword with a spiked guard over one side of the hilt, as she utilized Shunpo to match her opponent's movement. Irina continued to train with the various mixes of Excalibur, while Zenobia came closer and closer to finding her Zanpakuto's name and unlock her Shikai. The angel took flight and aimed to pin down her Soul Reaper friend, her Excalibur taking the form of a spear just before shooting to the blue-haired girl. Her blade sunk deep into the floor as she dropped to her knees, Zenobia disappearing at the last second with her flash step to reappear just next to Irina. "I win," she declared, her blade resting on top of Irina's neck. The angel released a sigh as her Excalibur turned into a white ribbon and wrapped around her upper left arm. "I really thought I had you that time," Irina said while Zenobia removed her Zanpakuto from her friend. "I figured I could match that Shunpo with Excalibur Rapid Mimic." "You just need to practice more," the budding Shinigami said as she sheathed her Zanpakuto. "You're still getting used to wielding more than one Excalibur." Strong to believe that time at the Peace Summit was sheer luck, Irina groaned as she got to her feet and stretched out. "By the way, this has been bugging me, but what's up with your Zanpakuto? I thought they were all katana." Zenobia blinked for a second as she tried to remember her lessons regarding the sword. "Well, their most basic form is that of a simple katana sword, but that's when they're completely blank." She started explaining as a member of the Messenger Corps appeared next to Kairaku. "But the more we use them, the more they're imprinted on by our Ryuryoku and begin to shift into a more unique sword. When I meet with Lord Otsu, he's the man that makes all of the Zanpakuto. He explained that my change is so drastic because I'm more used to Western-style swords and my Zanpakuto changed to suit me. Said I was close, but not there yet. Something about still holding something back." "Huh. Well, even Michael admitted that the church was a little too restrictive in many cases," Irina said, thinking back on their past indoctrination. "Reminds me of Martin Luther and the Reformation. We've had a turbulent history." She whispered sadly at the end while Zenobia offered a gentle smile and a hand on her former partner's shoulder. "Remember the truest lesson, love one another as I have loved you," she said, gaining a reassured smile from Irina as they clasped their hands. "Amen." "Oi, Zenobia," Kairaku called, gaining their attention. "Ichigo's got a mission for ya. He wants you to SCRT Gabriel and her brave saints around Soul Society. Then take her to Kurosaki Manor," he said, surprising the young Soul Reaper for being assigned such an important task. Before she remembered who was the Seraph's queen. OFCK. Royal Realm, Ichigo's arena. The usually barren stone disk was covered in a layer of frost and shards of ice, the air thick with the cold and creating the snow that was now blanketing the Serite and Rukengai. On this frozen disk was Rukia, clad in a pure white kimono with line patterns and an ornate collar and shoulder accessories of translucent ice with long looped ribbons on her back and an ice flower on her chest. She herself was now as pale of the snow with her long black hair, now pure white, with a hair accessory of ice on the back of her head, wielding her Sode no Shirayuki as a now transparent blade of ice. This form, resembling a goddess of ice and snow, practicing her swordplay, was her Bankai, Haka no Togame. She was in this form for almost a full day. When Ichigo informed both her and Captain Zaraki that the Soul King wished to see them, she was unsure of what to expect. Even though His Majesty was slightly more involved with the affairs of the world at large, he entirely operated through her husband, and only when he deemed necessary. The all-seeing God of the Soul Society was a mystery to almost everyone, but knowing that he now worked to also maintain the balance of souls put their hearts at some ease. Thus, both captains were brought before the Soul King, who then used his left hand to alter their bodies. He stated that they needed to be able to withstand their powers and use them to their fullest potential. After that, the two began their own training to get used to their new bodies. Zaraki was sent to the depths of the Mukin while Rukia stayed in the royal realm. Here she danced with her blade, a body that was completely devoid of heat, bringing winter to the Soul Society. She made one more swing, sending out a wave of cold energy that turned to ice, before stopping and turning around with a smile as she heard the hiss of ice against heat. "Hello, Ichigo?" she said, facing a figure cloaked in fire, the flames making the ice melt and crack from the rapid change in temperature. The flames calmed somewhat to show her husband, still wrapped in the flames of Kagetsuchi. "Been training strong, I see. You look truly radiant in this form," he said, walking up to her and placing a burning hand on her cheek, the fire immediately getting extinguished as his hand began freezing from the contact. A beauty matched only by how deadly it is. She leaned into his touch, unable to sense any heat but could somehow feel his warmth. I'm sorry that you have to stay here while you train. I understand the reason. But could you still visit? At least once a day? She asked, holding the hand against her cheek. He gave her his answer by placing his lips against hers, the contact freezing his flesh briefly before they separated. Rushing the rest of this timeline, because this is taking too long. Each segment is a separate thing. She's so cute, Tilda, Gabriel squealed while cradling the bundled-up baby devil Celia, the angel and her suit loving her almost immediately after seeing her upon their entry to the Kurosaki Manor. All was well for the preparation phase for both the raiding games and coming battle with the OSF was underway. Azazel delivered the other sacred gears that were the other fragments of Vulitra, and Saji would soon undergo an operation that intended to restore the Dragon King as a stronger sacred gear, provided Saji survived the dragon's test. I said I'm fine, put me back in. Riaz ordered Aiken as she was sat in a chair with a headset resting on her crown with a screen over her eyes. One of her training measures included a VR dive into past experiences and simulated possible events to hone her decision-making skills and thinking quicker. Her raiding game with Sona was almost constantly repeated, trying to overcome the worst game of her life. Unbeknownst to her, however, was that she was leaking out small traces of her destruction magic, which was something Urahara and Mayuri intended for to extract and study it, in case it was necessary for anything. You know, I had my doubts, but I can see how this is good exercise, Akino said with a small blush while her, Rias, and Asia watched Yoruichi swing and wrap around a pole while wearing lingerie that left almost nothing to the imagination and instructed them to do the same. The Shihuan woman brought all three to a room with a pole for each and gave a demonstration on their next physical exercise course. Her final tip was dance like your pervy dragon was watching. Issei happened to be in a room next to them with a window that required he keep a steady stream of magic channeling through if he wanted to watch them dance. The pillars and Kaido were completed and Shinji oversaw the transfer of them over to Ajika for the finishing touches, devising a spell specifically designed to separate the civilians from the fighters for when the battle finally began. The innocents would stay with the city proper while the duplicate became the battlefield for the OSF and the Gotai. Saji would survive the operation and after completing his rehab, would find Issei and challenge him to another fight with nothing holding them back. The rematch was observed by Urahara, Mayuri, Azazel, Ajika, and Serafal, while Sona and Rias gave their respective pawns some motivation. Sona gave Saji an embrace on the cheek, and Rias had Issei poke her nubs. Both promised a little extra if their respective pawn won. Issei, while possessing more self-control, almost immediately activated his scale mail for the promise of more of Rias's melons. This battle was recorded and Serafal took a copy, getting an idea for the entertainment media side of her Satan job, and she would later announce a script writing contest based on that fight. Eventually she got an entry of 2 co-authors under the pen names of Satan Red and Angel Black, titled BRST Dragon Emperor. Ajika would complete the additions to the pillars and would start planning out how best to distribute them throughout the floating region of Agrias. As he did so, he had the idea of making multiple duplicates to serve the same broadcasting purposes that the pillars were advertised to do. He figured it'd help sell the deception and not bring too much attention to the ones in Agrias. A few days later and the setup was completed, many devil citizens gathering around the new and unusual sites. They did a couple tests to ensure the broadcast function worked, and then Serafal would have the Sajise rematch air on the system, while giving it the different scripted narratives from the contest from earlier. BRST Dragon Emperor became the favorite of the children. Squad 1 Barracks, Head Captain's Office. Ichigo looked over the various reports of the past 2 weeks, mostly combat data and training reports of the Gotai and the 2 devil peerages. Ajika told him that it looked like they were averaging out into the high class with Issei showing the most improvements, currently in the middle high class. It was one of the better news pieces to cross his desk, but another was one from Shinji. It took a moment for him to make sense of the wizard's habit of inverted writing. Most of it was Shinji messing with some of the devils and finding his only love multiple times, but there was the most important piece of information hidden in it. The trap is set. Now to get ready for the assault. The hybrid said with a smirk, raising his head as the doors to his office opened to reveal Kenpachi Zaraki. How are you? The Squad 11 captain stretched his neck while rolling his right shoulder, his bones popping with the movements. Still pretty stiff. The berserker answered, maybe a good fight will loosen me up. Ichigo flashed in front of him and swung Kyoka Sawaitsu for Zaraki's neck, the only result being a clang and sparks against the Kenpachi's uncut skin. The two smiled in an unspoken promise to have a proper fight later on. Kagetora, Ichigo called out, his lieutenant flashing to his side. Send word throughout the Gotai. We're heading into battle. Get into position around the fake Agrias. Captain Toshiro Hitsugeya and Oraheim will play the part of my SCRT, while we go to meet up with Captain Shinji Hirako in the Devil Netherworld. For now, I'm going to retrieve Captain Rukia Kurosaki from the Royal Realm. Sir, rules of engagement for when the battle begins? Nagao asked, already knowing what the answer will be. No mercy. Slaughter every last member of the OSF. Ichigo said coldly.